Hey, everybody, welcome to the show. This is always one of my favorite episodes. This is the June Hatmaker Book Club edition of the show, in which I get to talk to the author of our book selection for this month. This is a fantastic perk of being in the book club, is we always have access to our author and we get to ask her. We mostly feature female writers almost entirely. We've had a few good men in there over the course of 5 years, but we mostly feature women, and we get to ask them our questions, and then they come into our book club for Zooms, and we have this up close and personal access to them for the month, which feels really special. But we love to bring this conversation to the big channel too, in case you're a reader and you're like, hey, looking for a great author, looking for a great book, looking for a great title. We are here for you. So let me tell you about our author for our June JHBC book club selection. We've got Sophie Cousens. You will likely know her if you love the genre. So Sophie's she's a British author, absolutely known for this razor sharp wit, that sort of British humor that is so ubiquitous and so fun. Very charming characters, likable, lovable, basically rom-coms. This is her genre, and she's so good at it. Maybe because she was a former TV producer. She's done all this like really interesting reality TV. So she comes out of these wild scenarios. And so she's got all these funny stories and experiences and just the human experience at her fingertips. Her books now have been published in over 20 languages. So her previous novels include This Time Next Year, Before I Do, and they're runaway hits, all of them. I love it. At one point, she says very casually, I asked her something in this interview about moving from like the wild world of TV producing to being a novelist, also in a much more remote location, which she'll explain in a minute. And she just kind of very casually in one sentence goes, well, I needed a different space. And so I got an agent, I wrote a book, and then it was like my debut novel was selected as a GMA pick of the month. And I'm like, that is not a normal sentence, and that is not a normal experience. Most people don't just go, okay, I want to be a writer now, so I'm going to go ahead and be a very successful one. But she absolutely is. So we are reading in JHBC this month her latest book called Is She Really Going Out With Him? And let me just put it to you this way, because we'll talk about it. If you've ever tried to date post-divorce, hello. While you are juggling motherhood, and trying to figure out who you are after having married a person that you met in super young adulthood, high school or college, then this is your book. You can see why I was drawn to it. You can see why it absolutely resonated with me. Love in Your 40s. And we have such a delightful heroine, Anna, in the book. We have such a fun cast of characters and a really original storyline. And it has just been a delight to read. It's a perfect summer novel. And Sophie is such a delightful, warm person. So this conversation is fun. She is fun. The book is fun. You'll love it. So having said that, help me welcome to the show, Sophie Cousens. Sophie, welcome. Absolutely delighted to have you just on the show, and more importantly, in my book club this month.
Oh, thank you so much for choosing my book. I'm absolutely honored.
It's been a delight. We, for everybody listening kind of in the greater podcast community, we are reading Is She Really Going Out With Him?, which is one of Sophie's just brilliant, wonderful books. But here's where I want to start. Because of course this conversation between you and I obviously goes to our book club members. This is kind of a really special perk of being a member, is that we always get this incredible interview with our author, which feels so special. But also, we put this interview out on the big channel too. So for the people who are like, okay, tell me about Sophie, tell me about this book. Let's start with you, because you have such an interesting life. You have had an interesting life. You have one now. You have taken big swings from like way over here in this very extreme environment to kind of, frankly, way over here in what I consider something of an extreme environment that you are in right now. So could you talk just a little bit about your story arc and what you've done to bring you all the way to where you are now?
Well, yes, it's been a bit of a journey. So when I was in my 20s, I just always wanted to work in TV. I just knew from the get-go that I just wanted to work in production and in comedy. And so kind of worked my way up in London, working on all sorts of shows. And in TV, you just really have to start at the bottom as a runner and gradually get up to researcher and assistant producer. And worked on lots of shows like Russell Howard's Good News and Graham Norton and Big Brother.
Yeah.
And so it was fun and it was crazy and it was just, often doesn't feel like work. But the perfect job for your 20s when you can be working late and you can be doing 6-day weeks and you can be sort of living at work. And then we got married and my husband got offered a job in Jersey, which is a small little island in the Channel between Jersey and England, Jersey and France. Sorry,
right,
England and France.
We're not talking about New Jersey Americans.
Not New Jersey, yeah, the original Jersey.
That's right, the original Jersey.
Which is a 9 by 5 mile island, and it's very gorgeous and beautiful, but there's certainly no TV production here.
Oh my gosh.
So I had to have a little bit of a think that if we were going to stay here, what I was going to do. Had some children and then really needed to go back to work for my own mental health.
Yes, I'd say less.
Needed some kind of creative stimulation, and I'd always wanted to be a writer. That was always been in the back of my mind as something that was a yearning that was there. And so I thought, well, if not now, when? So really gave it a shot. Got an agent, got a book deal, and that was, the rest is history really, because then had This Time Next Year, which was my debut in the US, and that was a GMA book club pick and
amazing
bestseller. And it was really a dream come true. And in a way, now the TV industry is very difficult actually, and I look at lots of my friends who are still in it and trying to balance family life and with streaming and stuff.
Totally.
Live comedy entertainment is really tough at the moment, so I feel very grateful that I've managed to have a kind of second career in something a little bit different.
I love how you very just kind of casually say, I wanted to write, so I got an agent, I got a book deal, that book went on to be a GMA pick, as if that is anywhere near normal. That is not normal. That is not the normal aspiring writer's path. I mean, not one single thing of it. It's not super easy to get an agent. It's certainly not super easy to get a book deal. And then I don't know many debut books who go on to that sort of like acclaim. So congratulations on you shot out of a rocket.
I've left out failure in that little kind of in that little story of my career. There were other times that I tried to write, I wrote manuscripts, I sent them off, they didn't get accepted. I had an ebook that was published that sold about 50 copies just to my friends and family. So
of course
there were some failures on the way, but I've just edited those out for now. It's very important to remind people that they are there.
You are so right. You cut your teeth on a few lower rungs on the ladder. I'm mixing metaphors, but we can let it go. Before we kind of move forward into this book and more questions that I love to ask our authors about process and your creative space, I can't help it. You're here, and we just how often do I get to speak to somebody who worked on like Big Brother? I've got to hear something from it. Like, give us something. That show was so ubiquitous for us at the front edge of a lot of that genre. Now it's just kind of every which where and every which way. And it's kind of almost saturated, if you will. But at the time, Big Brother, I mean, none of us would miss it. Like, that was conversation piece week after week. And it was so creative and innovative and original. And so also bananas. So I'd love to hear you talk about your experience on that show just a little bit, and any stories that you get to tell outside of an NDA.
I mean, the scary thing about Big Brother is it's not just a TV show. It is, you are looking after a house full of people. And so as a producer, you are also the voice of Big Brother. So when you're on shift, you are the voice that goes in the diary room. And there's a lot of kind of admin around the show, like getting them fed, getting them their challenges, getting all of this stuff that actually so much of it doesn't end up going on TV at all. And I found it quite interesting just being in that position. I was like a night producer sometimes. So you'd be the most senior person on set, dealing with someone who'd had too much to drink, coming to the diary room, having a little meltdown about something.
Sure.
And you'd kind of have to talk them down. And it was a brand new experience for me, because having been a producer on shows that were much more, well, just produced basically, because you've got a script and you've got a plan about exactly what you're getting. Whereas this, was doing kind of reality where you're just dealing with real people and real people's emotions and the whole experience of being in this slight madhouse. I remember there was one incident where they all gone a bit crazy and they were awake at midnight and they were all trying to fry bacon on the lampshades because the oven had been taken away or something. And, I had to be like, Big Brother says stop frying bacon on the lampshades. And they all had nicknames for the different Big Brother voices, because obviously they were there were different ones, and they were like, oh, it's Posh Big Brother. And that was that you? That was me. They were like, Posh Big Brother is telling us to stop frying on the lampshade. And, so they have a laugh with you. That's all kind of never on TV. There's so much that's not on TV.
I mean, because the cameras are kind of constant, right? So
constant.
Yeah. Basically everything's on the cutting room floor. But also, LOL, that you are essentially having to mother these peers. You're in your 20s. Like, it's not as if you had this wealth of adult experience underneath your belt to know how to talk down meltdowns and come aparts and disasters and chaos. Like, that was kind of a lot to manage, probably.
It was. And also, so before the show started, we did have a week of kind of Big Brother training of like how Big Brother talks to people and how, because there is a kind of uniform response and tone and kind of, which again, I found fascinating to see, what the personality of Big Brother was, that we were all trying to maintain a kind of standard way of talking to people.
Which was like what? Authoritarian sort of? What was it?
Yeah, it was sort of empathetic but authoritative and calm and measured. I can't really remember. It was so long ago, but I remember feeling a little out of my depth. I was a bit out of I felt like like mothering these people who were who very quickly became institutionalized as well. I didn't do any other reality TV after that, put it that way.
Okay, say less. That's a good way to describe that, and that was the end of that.
That was the end of that.
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, because you have taken a pendulum swing now to this really remote, small, quiet life. I don't think I realized how little the island was until you just described it dimensionally. You are in a completely different environment. And so I'd like to hear what it is like for you to be in that kind of space and how you have learned to let it inform your writing and inspire your creativity. And because also I'm putting in 2 or 3 questions at once. I'd like to hear about that, but also, do you miss some of the like motion and chaos and energy and constant, go of your life before this? Because you've just really got 2 different experiences.
I think I really do. I absolutely loved the energy of TV, of when you're working on a big show, something like Graham Norton, that's like a live show every week that you're preparing for. So it's like the momentum is huge. And you've just got a team of really smart, funny, energetic people that you're working with. So every day going into work was really fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Honestly, and just the kind of the office banter when you work in comedy is another level, because everyone's
just doing a bit. Everyone's doing a bit constantly. Yeah.
And you kind of take it for granted at the time. And I think then, having worked in like a normal office since,
Yeah.
you realize, oh right, this is not quite as high octane.
These little kids aren't as funny as
These
my
little kids,
TV colleagues.
yes.
They're way less funny.
Way less funny.
Yeah.
And I think that, but when I was in my 20s and early 30s doing it, I am very much an extrovert. And so I got a lot of energy from being around other people. And I like to think of ideas by being in a room where you'll sort of say something and someone else will say something. And then together you will come up with an idea that's better than the sum of its parts.
Totally.
And then I think what I found hard about writing is that 95% of the time you are just alone on your own with your ideas.
That's right.
You'll occasionally put your head above the parapet and ask an editor what they think, but really it's not a team game.
No, it isn't.
Solo game.
Golly, that is so true.
Yeah.
That is so, I mean, you went from full collaborative work entirely.
Yes.
To you're literally on an island.
Yes.
Doing your own thing. Yeah, that's a big change.
With no input. Yeah, no input from other people, really.
That's right. I'd love to hear you talk about, let's move into the book a little bit. Is she really going out with him? It is, I've mentioned this, but it is in the vein of humor and characterization that I cherish. The Notting Hills and the Bridget Jones and this just delightful, nostalgic for me tone and type and energy of a story. And I think you've mentioned this before, but I mean, you hooked your writing right into that river, and it is amazing. It is so fun to read.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Those were clearly some of your inspirations or that you were drawing from, but I'd love to talk about the origin story of this book in the title too. Where did this idea come from? And particularly if you would mind kind of giving a bit of a story arc for the folks listening in who haven't read the book, so they're learning about it for the first time.
Is She Really Going Out With Him is basically about a divorcee called Anna, who is, she's a single mom, she's got 2 kids, and she is not interested in dating again. She is struggling to hold it all together, to be a good parent, to hold down her job as a journalist. And then her work suggests that her column is a little out of touch and maybe she needs to do a dating column. So she's kind of pressured into getting herself back out there. And she goes on a few internet dates and she hates it. So she comes up with this idea: why don't I let my kids choose who I'm going to date, and I'll meet people in real life? Like, is it still possible to meet people in real life? So you have this character who's reluctantly dipping her feet back into the dating pool, without the life preservers of optimism and youth, is something like her boss says to her. So it's really about a kind of dating in later life. It's all of the challenges of kind of finding what you want again, having come out of a long marriage, trying to co-parent, trying to kind of be everything to everyone at the same time. Right. So I really enjoyed this sort of the layering of this story, because it's not just, a 20-something optimistically looking for love. It's a woman who has some baggage and a life, and is maybe a little bit jaded about love, and not as optimistic and open as she might have been, 15 years before.
It's no mystery why I was drawn to this book, in particular to Anna and just kind of the whole storyline, because in this genre, we do tend to see young, single women kind of predominantly in their 20s and set in sort of that environment. And so I'm somebody who was married for a lot of years, 26.
Wow.
Found myself single unexpectedly, for sure. Like, it was not, the writing was not on the wall. It wasn't like that. It was like a shock and awe. Today, your marriage is over. At 45, and I had kids, and Anna has kids, and we don't, our lead character in a rom-com does not normally. And so the fact that you have given her all this dimension of adulthood, and then also I love that you gave her this sort of perspective of, I'm not really into all this. I like my independence. I'm not pining for a man so my life can finally be right again.
Yes.
None of that sort of frantic energy of sometimes a young adult. And so I love this character. I love her. I'd love to hear how you came up with her. And then even some of the details of her stories, because they're so hilarious. It's so outrageous. It's something only an adult who went back into the dating pool could possibly go, oh my gosh, yes, this is literally how it is. So can you talk about the inspiration for her and where you got some of your ideas? Because a lot of it's wacky.
So I'm in my kind of, mid to early 40s, and I'm just at the age where a lot of my friends are getting divorced. And I think what I found interesting about it is that when you're younger and you hear about divorce, it's all a bit sort of, people associate it with sort of like failure, and it's really sad and it's really depressing. And actually what I was witnessing is women having a bit of a rebirth and finding themselves again and getting back out there and also having a chance to date with a new perspective. You're of like, so right. I'm not necessarily looking for the father of my children, but I'm looking for who suits me now.
That's right.
As the person that I am now. And I actually found it quite inspiring in some of my friends, and sort of thinking, this is an interesting story. This story of the next chapter that you get to have with a new perspective and a new kind of, you might have a slightly different taste than you did in your 20s when you were looking to date. And also just some of the stories that they had, about sort of dating younger or dating divorced parents themselves were just really rich stories in terms of from a writing perspective. I was sort of noting them down, thinking, right, never tell me any stories if you don't want them to be in a book.
Oh gosh, that is the truest thing you have ever said. It is so dangerous to be friends with a writer.
It's so dangerous. Yes. And actually one of my best friends, I did finish this book and I thought, hang on a minute. I have put a few of these anecdotes in that are directly lifted from her life. I better just double check that she's okay for me to mention that happened and this happened. But all with a bit of, the character of Anna is actually more based on, what I would imagine being like in that situation. And I also found it funny, the idea of not wanting it, because so many romances start with someone who's really looking for love or wanting that to kind of be the missing piece of them. And I just actually, as a character, to write someone who was quite adverse to this and was being pressured into it by work and all of these different angles, was really fun to write.
Oh my gosh, I agree.
Yeah, she was sort of won over in the end.
I agree. That rings really true to my experience and a lot of what I see in the women around me at kind of this middle of life redo stage, which is, oh my gosh. I had been married for so long. I had not dated since 1992. I don't even understand the dating world. I don't even know what's going on out there.
Or online dating, right?
In the whole world. And I remember kind of at the beginning having gone through a couple of years of just recovery, of recalibrating and anyway, going, I don't know how to meet a man. All my friends are married. We are old. Where are the men? I don't even know. And I don't know how you meet them. So of course, everybody's going, you got to go to the apps.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I'm freaking out. And so I know nothing about apps. And I remember seeing a celebrity, like a Hollywood celebrity on Instagram, who I love. And she was single, and I remember her saying something about Bumble, something along the lines of the women get to choose on Bumble. Yes. And I'm like, I don't really know what that means, but that feels like the right thing for me. I kind of want to be in the driver's seat. I'm not. So, one night, it's probably 11:30 at night, I put down 2 glasses of wine and I'm like, all right, I'm going to make a Bumble profile, which I don't even know. I mean, and my thought was, no, if the women can choose, I thought that meant no men on the app could see me, that I could only see them. And so that I just was safe. I could just look casually. Nobody knew I was there. And so when I made my profile, I only did the bare minimum. I put my first name, my age, and my city, because I had to. Yes, and then they were like, give us 3 pictures. So I just put up the first 3 I could find. And nothing else. Not, do you have kids? Do you want to get married again? Are you, nothing. I filled out nothing because I didn't think anybody could see it. And that was so overwhelming for me at midnight. I'm like, okay, I've done it. Let me go to bed.
That's a good way to start, probably, not having to fill. It's probably overwhelming doing all of the questionnaires.
I didn't do any of it. And I closed my phone and I went to bed. And the next morning I wake up and I mean, I have, and I counted because I knew I was going to want to know this number, 144, like whatever you want to call it, messages or like,
oh my goodness,
whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, they can see me. I'm not invisible. And I did not even know what to do. So I looked through them. I picked one that looked, I didn't put any parameters in. I wasn't saying like, I want you between this age and this age or nothing. So every man in a 50-mile radius is bumbling me or whatever you want to say.
Oh, amazing.
Anyway, disaster. I did not know how to speak to a stranger online. I went with my girlfriends a couple hours later, told them I got on Bumble. They freaked out. They grabbed my phone. They're all yelling at me at once. I burst out crying. I pulled my sweatshirt like over my head and I deleted the app. And that is my 12 hours on Bumble.
That was your 12 hours on Bumble. Okay, that's intense. That is intense.
So I get Anna, who's like,
yes.
I don't think so, you guys. I don't think so. Okay, listen, let's talk about her love interest because it is a rom-com. And you gave us a fantastic story. Can you talk a little bit about Will and your inspiration for him? And was he an amalgamation of some people that you know or not? And how did you come up with Will?
So Will is basically her kind of nemesis at work who, while she's writing a column about meeting people in real life, he pitches the idea that he'll be a bit of a man about town, dating people on the apps. So they're kind of going head to head. So she has to work with him. And he's this sort of young, ambitious upstart compared to her, who's been there a long time and worked very hard, but maybe been a little overlooked. And I think I came to the story of thinking, right, some of my books I've done are a little bit more high concept or a little bit more, jumping around in time. And with Is She Really Going Out With Him, I just thought, I just want to do like a Sophie Cousens classic rom-com that covers a lot of the tropes.
Love them.
I didn't really know about tropes until I started writing these kind of books. And then I kind of realized how much people love them, but also how fun it is to try and do them in your own way. Yeah. So I think for me, Will was right. What's my version of a kind of enemies to lovers, or a kind of, it's like enemies to lovers. They quickly become friends in the book, but at the beginning they are really pitted against each other. So I think Will was born out of, what kind of man would Anna find super annoying?
Yes, great.
That kind of young, entitled, confident. He asked for a new chair at work because he wants better back support. Yes. And Anna's a little bit like just worried that she doesn't want to ask for anything because she's got flexible hours and she's a mum. And I think, again, that's a very relatable experience for a lot of women where they feel like their work is being flexible for them around family life. So they can't be as arsky or demanding about pay or anything like that. And then this young 30-year-old guy is coming in going, I want this, I want that. And so I thought that was quite an interesting relationship, because at the same time that she sort of pushes against him at the beginning, he also kind of teaches her to advocate for herself a little bit and become more confident, which is a really nice arc to see in the story.
Absolutely. And I love that you lean into the tropes. Tropes are enduring because they are beloved. Yes. So sometimes that word has a negative connotation, but in this case, it's not true. Like these are story tropes that readers love, and so I love how you talk about them, and that you go, no, I'm not going to steer away from them or try to reinvent them or try to avoid them. I'm going to go full in. Like, let's pick up a handful of the most favorite tropes and drop them into the storyline in your way and in your voice, which you did so beautifully. And it's so fun. And you just tugged us along the plot with such pleasure. It was so fun to read because there's so much humor in here, of course. I mean, it is. It's a rom-com. It's funny.
I mean, that's nice also what you said about the sort of referencing back to the early 90s and early 2000s rom-coms. And I think in my head, my books are always I absolutely just love the films of that era. And that's
Totally.
very much kind of the tone in which I write. And I think there was something just quite kind of pure and simple about that era of films, which is why so many of them are enduring. And they're
That's
still,
true.
if you think back to How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days and
Yeah.
all the amazing Reese Witherspoon's rom-coms and Richard Curtis ones, they're so enduring. And I think because they are just fun, sort of quite straightforward love stories that just work. And sometimes I think modern films try and do too many things for too many people. And if you look back at what worked, they were quite pure in some ways.
What a good time for that storyline.
Yes.
I cherish this. My kids, I have a bunch of kids and they're all in their 20s and they love movies from that era for the same reasons that you just mentioned. They've got a purity to them that has gotten, I guess, a little muddied, maybe, if that's a fair thing to say. They've gotten a little bit more complex. And so it's so fun to pick up a story from that era and I know what I'm getting and I love what I'm getting. And you did. That's the energy of your book for sure. Speaking of pure, one of the cutest, like obviously most original, I've never seen this in any book I've ever read, and I'm a voracious reader, bits of the plot was having Anna's kids pick her dates. So cute. And of course, such a good tool for hilarious bits of the story. I mean, that just handed you such like a blank page of opportunity to be awesome. Can you talk about that a little bit and then some of the funniest parts that you ended up getting to write about the dates that they chose for her?
Yeah, so I think when I first pitched this to my editor of like, so there's in the story there's 7 and 12, so they're not like little tiny kids, but they're also not kind of teenagers doing it themselves.
That's right.
And there was a little bit of, oh, is that a bit icky? I don't know. But then actually the way that it transpires is really not, because it's sort of her saying I've just tried on the apps and they've asked me to fill in like, what are my hobbies and where have I been on holiday? And you know what? I've got just as much chance of liking someone based on that stuff as I do on you picking someone based on the fact that we both have brown hair or the fact that like we both hate cyclists. And so it was quite fun just to see like what kind of people would children that age pick. And the fact is, they don't have a huge sphere of adults that they know. So you end up with like their divorced friend's dad at school, the postman, the swimming teacher. But then all of these people really add something to Anna's life and her perspective. So I think it was quite a fun message as well, that I know the apps are the easiest way to meet people, and they're so helpful for so many people to just sort of widen their sphere. But also, what would it be like if you had to just look at your community and try and approach people, and how out of practice we would be at that, and how awkward it would be. And so some of the fun when I was imagining like dating with kids in mind, as a mother of young children, it's amazing how much like lice and nits becomes a part of your life.
God,
when they just you get the email from school of like, oh, someone in the class has lice, and you have to look it up, and it's just so disgusting.
Oh, you just sent a shiver down the spine of every woman listening. We know.
It's just so, and so one of the things that I was imagining was like, okay, imagine you've just come home, one of your children has lice, you've got a really hot date lined up tonight, you have to go, you can't cancel, the babysitter's here, but you obviously are worried you've got nits. So this scene, one of my favorite scenes in the book is where Anna has to go on a date and she wears a hat and she's trying to keep away from everyone, and she feels really disgusting. And I just love that kind of juxtaposition of like the trials of motherhood with trying to like get back out there and feel sexy. And it's just, very kind of rich comedy area.
Hilarious. You nailed it. Let me ask you a question about process, because I always feel lucky that I get to interview so many novelists who make up a story out of their brain and then write it in a book. It's such a specific kind of writing. I'm a writer, but I'm nonfiction. And so, I'm writing from a completely different channel. And I'd love to hear you discuss how you write, essentially. Like, do you start with a character? Do you start with the end in mind? Do you have it kind of plotted out in your brain? And maybe it's not all the same for the different books that you write. Maybe it depends on your project, but particularly for this one, can you talk about, are you a planner? Are you a plotter? Are you a, hey, let's see what happens when I put my fingers on the keyboard today?
So I think I always come to my books from a kind of what's the top line hook for this book. And for me, that always starts with a big what if. So I think I've had, what if the love of your life turned up, the one that got away turned up the night before your wedding, or like, what if you picked up the wrong suitcase at the airport and then fell in love with the contents?
Yeah.
And then this one's obviously, what if you let your kids choose your dates for you?
So good.
I always start with that kind of big what if that I think people can get on board with and relate to.
Yes.
And then I sort of flesh out sort of what the situation would be. And I always have a pretty good idea of the beginning and the end, but I'm not a planner. I'm pretty much a pantser, and I kind of just see where the story takes me, which I wish I wasn't, because it's a very labor intensive way to write. And I think there's a lot of waste, and there's a lot of, going in the wrong direction and thinking, oh, this isn't quite working. And, I always wish I could sort of finish my books and then throw it all away and start again from scratch, which doesn't ever quite happen, but would probably be better. But then I find, so once I've got the kind of the scaffolding in place of the plot, my first draft, the character is usually quite a blank canvas, I would say. And it's only after the first draft that I then know who this person is and where I want their arc to go. And so what I want some of their attributes to be. And so it's then that I kind of go back and fill in all the details that make that person sort of stand out as a character. But it is, I don't know if anyone else does it like that. Everyone has their own kind of way. And I've tried to be more of a planner. And
it's just not your way.
It's just not my way. And actually some of the stuff, like there's a scene in this where she goes on a date with someone fishing and ends up, trying to fly a hook and hooks him in the face. And again, I kind of only thought of that as I was writing it, of like, oh, what would be the worst thing to happen on a fishing date? And I just don't think I could have sat down at the beginning and thought, right, okay, knits, fishing, swimming, I think I have to find these things as I go through.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But that probably means that you end up doing quite a bit of rewriting, right? Did you have whole sections of your first draft on this book that you chunked?
Yes. And I think also it just means a lot of rewriting because you don't know the characters yet. So you're kind of writing them, having these conversations, and then by the end, when you know them better, you might sort of think,
she wouldn't have done that.
She wouldn't have done that. And then actually you have strands that, so for example, one of the things that they end up becomes a little bit of a symbol of love is that she doesn't really advocate for herself. And she always says about food, like, oh, I'll just have how it comes. I'll have how it comes. And Will at the end says to her, I don't want to know how do you want to have your sandwich? And it sounds like a really small thing, but it's kind of indicative of her advocating for herself and saying, you say how you want it. You're allowed to say that you want it a particular way. You don't have to just always be easy and go along with the others. And again, that came at the end, and then I kind of filtered it through. So for me, some of those little, and I really liked that about their relationship, that small sandwich detail, but I didn't know about that until I'd written the whole book.
That's
and then
so
had to
great.
Go back and pepper it through. Yeah.
Well, as readers, I just want to say we absolutely appreciate your commitment to giving the best story that there could be. Because people who aren't writers, it's hard to describe the feeling of getting to the summit and then going back down to start over and summit again. Like, you want to talk your own self into going, it's good enough. Like, nobody will know any different. Like, let's just publish it like this, but in service to the story and the best version of itself, to come back to the base of the mountain and climb it as many times as you have to until you go, this is it. This is the truest, best version of this story, is really a labor.
It's so painful. And every time I kind of forget how painful it is. And then there's a great quote I love. I can't remember who said it, but they said, I hate writing, but I love having written.
That's
And
it.
that is just such a good
It is.
trait for me about the process, because I finish a book and I'm talking to people about the story and I'm like, oh yeah, I love this story. I
Of
love these
course.
characters.
Yeah.
And then you're in the midst of like trying to make something work. And my latest book, I kind of did actually scrap and start again 3 times. And it's been so torturous.
My
I kind of
gosh.
think, how have I not learned how to do this better?
Totally.
I'm on book 6 and I still feel like a complete novice every single time I start.
That is such a great segue, because as we kind of wrap it up here, I'd love to hear what you're working on. Or it could be, because writing is such a delay.
Yes.
You write it 2 years ago and then the world finally gets it. So what either are you working on right now, or that you have been working on that's about to come out that is new?
So I'm currently finishing off my 6th book, which is called And Then There Was You, which I'm just doing the kind of line edit, so kind of tweaking and it is about a girl who is in her early 30s and she is invited to her 10-year reunion at university, and it makes her have a little bit of an existential crisis because she was voted most likely to succeed at university and she doesn't feel like she's anywhere close to that in her personal life, in her professional life. And so her friend says, look, if you're going to go to this reunion, you just need to take a really hot guy with you to make you have a little confidence. So it's kind of like a fake dating, high school reunion. Think like Romeo and Michelle. It's like, that's the setting. But it's got a little twist that I won't talk about, but it's going to be, it's quite high concept. Let's put it that way.
I love this. That's fantastic. When does it come out?
It's going to be November, mid-November.
Very good.
Out in the States. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. So does that mean you're already germinating your next idea?
I am, yes. And I'm also, I've been adapting some of my books for film scripts, which the first one has been adapted and some other ones are in development. So I'm kind of always noodling some of those as well. And I love the different type of craft that script writing is. And now I'm at the stage of, thinking about book 7, rom-com 7, which is always the fun bit where you are sort of, blue sky thinking like,
totally.
What would be a really embarrassing situation to put someone in? That's where I start.
I love this. What a dream you must be to work with an adaptation world, having come from TV. I mean, how many authors really understand production and movement and just all of it? You do. And so you have really this interesting position to pull from everything you've ever done to be so valuable in moving to like film and TV. That's really exciting. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Your stories are perfect for that. I can see it. I can see it in my brain. I can.
Yeah, and I think I have a very visual, like, as in when I'm writing books, I'm seeing it as the movie.
Of course.
So I've already like planned the premiere. I mean, it won't necessarily happen.
Totally. Who would you love to cast for Sophie? I just said Sophie. You're Sophie. Who would you love to cast for Anna?
Oh, I don't know. That's such a tricky one because it's got to be a kind of British actress. I love Eloise from Bridgerton. You know that character? She's got like different.
Yes, I love her.
She's probably too young. She's in her 20s, but like vibe wise, she is like, she's got that look of like not interested in romance.
That is such a good choice.
Yes. She's too young though. I want to insult her by saying she could say someone in her late 30s, but that is that vibe. That vibe.
Oh my gosh. That is, you just gave the most perfect answer. If we could add 10 years onto her life, yes. she would be perfect. I see what you're saying. This is fantastic. Last question. And it's hard when you are steeped in writing, innovating, editing, and releasing all at the same time to also be a reader. But most writers manage it somehow. We read in the gaps. We read when we're traveling. We read when we're trying to go to sleep, whatever it is. So love to hear anything that you are either reading right now that you really love or you've recently read that you go, oh, this is a great recommendation.
So I'm all about the audiobooks. I listen to a lot of audiobooks just because it fits into my life of like driving the kids around, all that kind of thing. So I'm currently listening to Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I am loving.
Yes.
She's just a very artful writer and I just find her stories, very original and compelling.
Totally. That just crossed my desk.
I love it, love it. And then I've just listened to the latest Emily Henry, Great Big Beautiful Life, which also, it's the same audio narrator, Julia Whelan, who's a master of that. So,
Oh, I love that.
yeah, she's like the queen of audiobooks. And I don't know how she does it, but she manages to do like male voice, kid voice, women's voice without really like putting on a voice, but it's very distinct characters. So she is a very artful audio narrator.
Oh, I love that. I did not know that. What's her name again?
Julia Whelan. If you look in, she's basically done most of the like top selling books.
Wow. That's her niche.
That is her niche, but she's just wonderful at it. And when you listen to one of her books, you see like, wow, yeah, no one can do it quite like Julia.
I couldn't do that.
I couldn't do
I could not do that. I narrate my own audiobooks, but it's different. It's nonfiction. I'm just reading my own words.
You're not putting accents in.
I'm not doing accents. I'm not doing man voices.
Exactly. And like, what does a sexy man sound like? Totally. I would just be sounding like this.
So would I. I would be like reading a child's book at bedtime. Like it would just, I could never do that. So that is a gift and a skill. Okay, that's a great suggestion.
And then I'm gonna. So those are quite mainstream books that I've been reading recently that I loved. But then in the year, some of the books that I really enjoy. I love kind of speculative fiction. So, The Husbands was one of my top reads of the year. About a woman who every time she sends her husband into the attic, a new husband comes down, and it's this sort of take on swipe culture and alternate universes. And it's one of those books that like I wish I had thought of.
That's such a good compliment.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And yeah, there's so many. I always love Holly Bourne's writing. I've just read her latest, and everything's gone out of my head.
I know. I get this question a lot too when I'm on interviews, and even though I read 2 books a week, probably, when I get that question, it is as if I have never read a book in my life.
Yes.
My brain just goes empty. I can't think of a single thing. I'm like, well, when I was like 8, I read The Secret Garden. Like I have to go back to childhood. I can't find a book.
I know.
Okay. We have been so delighted in book club reading your book together. It has just brought us so much joy and laughter. There's tons of us in our second act. And so we are finding so much that is relatable and hilarious. And it's so nice to see some of our story in midlife represented in a book like this. And
yes, good.
It is just such a good time. And so thank you for writing such a fun, creative story. Thank you for being a part of book club. It has just been a joy to have this as our kind of first book of the summer. It just nailed summer reading. Absolutely nailed it.
That's lovely to hear. And I hope everyone enjoyed it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we'll be standing in line for your next book when it comes out. About your, most likely to succeed university grad who's got to reckon 10 years later with a disappointing showing. So does that have a title yet, by the way?
And Then There Was You.
Oh, yeah. And then there was you. You did say that. Okay, perfect. I'm delighted to see you. So happy to meet you. If you're ever in Austin, Texas, please let me know and please let me take you to dinner.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophie.